I've fixed a few problems that were in the emulator, and I've also added, as you'll see in a minute, there you go. Now this is running the LZ version 4.2 of the code, and that runs and does everything. So if we go to utilities and info, you end up with the display for the LZ. So that needed a little bit of work because the RAM and the ROM is bank switched, so I had to add some bank switched logic in there, increase the RAM size and the ROM size, because that's inserted into my code automatically. I didn't have to do anything in the code, but that is actually larger. And the display, that was a bit of a problem as well, because the mapping of the buffer to the display is jumbled up compared to the XP, the two-line display. So I've had to put a jumbling in there before it's displayed. It does seem to be a bit slower as well for some reason, I'm not sure why, but that can probably be worked on. It also uses user-defined characters, so that square up there, not the flashing one, that's the cursor, so the cursor's working as well now. But the square is actually a little symbol that's put up there for each menu. So that's not working at the moment. I haven't done user-defined characters. It doesn't really affect anything. Everything sort of still works. So you can go into time and start the stopwatch, which once you start it, doesn't actually run at real time. But that's simply because this is a software emulation. There's no hardware clock, and it's only by chance really that it's come up roughly right. It's a little bit slow, I think. Yeah, there were a few bugs in the emulator. I've fixed those. I've still got some things to do. I've got to sort out the shift key. I think I know what's going wrong there. Turns out it's going to be hardware, I think, so I'm going to try a hardware mod for that. User-defined characters would be nice. And then I think I'm going to have a look at getting packs read. You can't write packs with this. There's no programming voltage on the power PCB. That's sort of been sacrificed for the Wi-Fi and other stuff. So it'll just be reading packs or writing RAM packs. RAM packs would be fine. It's just the EEPROM packs. So yeah, it's running the LZ. It can also run the XP using the same code, I think. Apart from the screen jumbling, that's going to be a bit of a problem. But it should be possible to look in the ROM and work out what type of ROM it is and automatically switch. So that's not in there at the moment. The test isn't there, but the actual code to do the switching is there. I just have to hard code it when I swap over. But the LZ ROM is a lot more capable than the XP. It can also doesn't have the Y2K problem, so you can actually set today's date there in 2021, and it will correctly get the day a week. And you can actually set it in the XP. You can't go past 1999. Yeah, off doesn't work either. It just sits there. I don't think it times out either, so the 5-minute timer must be running off the clock as well, or something. I haven't looked at that yet. Yeah, so I think the emulator, well, that's quite interesting. So the emulator works and runs quite a lot of code, even if there's a few instructions wrong, but various things like the calculator won't calculate properly, but it will now. 1 divided by 7. And that was down to just 1 or 2 instructions not working and doing something wrong, and that caused everything to work except you didn't get a carry in the BCD calculation for addition it was. Once I fixed that, everything works out. This is now running the LZ and the XP 4.2 and 3.3 ROMs, but I know there are instructions missing because they're just not implemented. Setting one of the flags and clearing one of the flags isn't in there, so the code can't use that, not to any real purpose anyway, nothing I've found. I'll go back and add those in, they're quite easy to do. There are no major heavily used instructions missing out of the emulator, but it is surprising how much of this will work even with 3 or 4 fairly important instructions with bugs in them such that they don't work properly. And that's what was happening previous to well, this version, because this version's got about 3 or 4 fixes in it. I've fixed the problem with the shift key. If I start the organiser up, select the language, and then let's go into find. So you can get Shift U, which is 1 and 2 and 3, but you didn't used to be able to get 0, and you can now, and the decimal point. And the delete key also works. If I move back now to the 3 and then do a Shift delete, it deletes the 3, whereas if I just press delete, it deletes the character before it instead of the character under it. So that's working. It turns out that the keyboard scanning lines, the drive lines, were open collector in the original circuit, and I've got them driven from a latch, a serial data in latch shift register. And because of that, with the open collector setup, you can press the Shift key and then press another key, and you'll be able to register that that other key is pressed when the drive line's driven. I had just normal push-pull outputs, so when I was scanning for the Y key, the Shift key, if it was held down, would be shorting the drive line for the Shift key and the drive line for the Y key. So what I've done is I've put a diode in so that you can actually override the drive for the Shift key. Really, all the lines should have diodes in. There's another little wrinkle in that I've done it as with pull down resistors instead of pull up and open collector. I've got pull down resistors, so I had to invert the logic. But that means I can, instead of using open collector, which I can't have on my latch, I can actually just use a diode wired OR, which is what I've got here, just a single diode to allow overriding of that drive column. I could put diodes on all of the drive signals, which would give you much more flexibility in terms of key presses, holding down more than one key, but I think the only key that happens on is the Shift key. So that's working a bit better. If we go back to the main menu, you can now turn it off. So that's just a matter of turning off one of the digital outputs that powers down all the supplies, and that is now off, and it will come back on when I press the on key is wired in to that circuit, and there's always power on it, and it manages to turn those transistors on and power everything up. So yeah, stuff going on there. So that's working. I've got the real-time clock on there. Bit of a problem with that in that the alarm output was holding the organiser on using this on circuit. It can also effectively press that button and turn the organiser on when an alarm goes off. That's going to require a bit of code to get that real-time clock integrated in with the organiser. It may be that it can only be used if the code is not running a ROM, because it uses a different sort of real-time clock mechanism, but we'll have a look at that. I might be able to emulate it using that chip. So yeah, quite a lot of stuff working. You can use it as a calculator. In fact, I did use it as a calculator to calculate some values that I then put into the organiser itself, so I have used it as a calculator, but still a few things to do, so I'll press on with those.